John Locke, the father of liberalism, a champion of freedom, and a man who made money from the slave trade. So, how on earth do we square that circle? That's the paradox we're digging into today.
I mean, think about that for a second. The man who wrote that we all have a right to liberty was also an investor in a company that literally bought and sold human beings. Was he a complete and total hypocrite, or is there something more going on here? Well, let's get into it.
Okay, first things first, you have to understand just how huge his ideas were. I mean, they were world-changing. Locke argued that power comes from the people, not from some divine right, that we're all born with basic rights that can't be taken away, and that where you end up in life shouldn't be decided by who your parents were. This stuff is the absolute foundation of modern democracy.
Which brings us right back to that really uncomfortable question. If Locke genuinely believed that all men are created equal, then how could he possibly have been involved in a system that treated people as property? I mean, it just feels like pure hypocrisy, right?
And look, the case against him, it's pretty damning. It's not just speculation. He helped write a constitution for the Carolina colony that straight up protected the institution of slavery. He owned stock in the Royal African Company, which was the company running England's slave trade. And we have documents in his own handwriting where, as part of his job, he wrote the word slaves again and again.
And this right here, this is a quote from that constitution he helped write. It gives a slave owner absolute power. That's the exact kind of unchecked, tyrannical power he would later spend his entire career arguing against. The contradiction is just stark.
So to even begin to untangle this mess, we've got to dive deep into his actual philosophy. Because for Locke, this wasn't just about politics. It was about defining the proper limits of power in every part of life, and it all started with religion.
For Locke, it all came down to this question: what is a government actually supposed to do? He came up with this term, civil interests. Basically, he said a government's job is to protect your body and your stuff, your life, your health, your property. That's it, full stop. It has no business, none at all, getting involved in saving your soul. And you have to get this, at the time, this was an absolutely radical idea. He said the #1 sign of a true religion wasn't having the right rituals or the right doctrine, it was toleration. For him, trying to force someone to believe something was not only wrong, it was literally impossible.
And he lays out his argument so clearly. It basically comes down to 3 points. First, nobody, not God, not the people, gave the government power over your soul. Second, a government can only use force, but true faith has to come from inside you. You can't be forced to believe. And third, on a practical level, if every king forced his own religion, and most kings are probably wrong, then most people in the world would be led to eternal damnation. It's this idea of limiting power that's so crucial to everything else he thinks.
Okay, so now we have to zoom out and look at the bigger picture. Because Locke wasn't just sitting in a room thinking up abstract ideas. He was in the middle of a huge fight, a philosophical war against the political system of his time. His work was a direct attack, a cannonball aimed right at the heart of the dominant political theory of his day, absolutism. This was the whole idea of the divine right of kings, that monarchs got their power from God and couldn't be challenged. Understanding this fight is the key to understanding Locke. So you can really see the clash of these two worldviews right here. On one side, you've got absolutism, power is handed down from God, your status in life is inherited, and your job is to obey. On the other, you've got Locke's liberalism. Power comes from the people, everyone has natural rights, and you absolutely have the right to overthrow a tyrant. These two ideas just could not coexist.
And this timeline is super important because it shows that his philosophy wasn't static. It changed dramatically based on what was happening around him. He starts out working for the monarchy, which is funding itself through the slave trade. But then, in 1675, there's a huge break. He and his boss Shaftesbury turn against the king, sell their stock in that slave trading company, and Locke even has to flee the country. His most famous books come out right after a revolution that kicked out that absolutist king.
And then you get this. This is where the story takes a massive turn. In his most important work, this is one of the very first things he writes, a brutal condemnation of slavery. He calls it a vile and miserable state. So how does this fit with a guy who owns stock in a slave trading company? And this is the key. This is how we can start to make sense of the paradox. For the later Locke, the guy writing his famous books, hereditary kingship and hereditary slavery weren't two different things. They were two heads of the same monster, the illegitimate claim that one person can have absolute inherited power over another. For him, fighting the divine right of kings was fighting the principle of slavery.
And, his ideas didn't just stop with politics and power. He took this same revolutionary thinking and applied it to us, to the human mind itself, and how we become who we are.
He came up with this idea that you've probably heard of, the tabula rasa, or blank slate. He argued we're not born with our personalities and ideas already baked in. Nope. He said we start as an empty slate, and everything we become is written on us by our experiences and our education. That's a massive blow to the whole idea of inherited status, isn't it?
So think about it. If we're all born as blank slates, what does that mean? It means education is, it's everything. As Locke puts it here, 9/10 of who we are comes from our education. It means that your character isn't something you're born with, it's something that's built. Anyone could become a good, rational person if they were raised the right way.
And all this led to a completely new way of thinking about education. He talked about having a sound mind and a sound body, about teaching kids virtue using reason, not just rules, treating kids like they're rational beings, not little animals. He wanted a practical curriculum with stuff like science and drawing, and he was dead set against physical punishment, which he thought just taught kids to be slavish. You can see how it all connects back to his core ideas, right?
All right, let's circle back and try to put all the pieces together. How do we resolve this paradox we started with? The philosopher of freedom who is tangled up with the business of slavery.
So, what's the final verdict on John Locke? Well, it's complicated. There's no easy answer here. Yes, his early career is tied up with a pro-slavery government, but he was more of a secretary than a policymaker back then. The crucial part is that his philosophy grew in reaction to that system, and when he finally did get real power later in life, he used it to try and chip away at the laws that supported slavery. It's a key point. Slavery came from the world of absolutism. Locke's liberalism was the weapon created to fight it.
At the end of the day, you can't just slap a hero or villain sticker on John Locke. It just doesn't fit. He was a man of his time, a transitional figure who was part of a system he ultimately helped destroy. He didn't live his ideals perfectly, who does? But he created the intellectual tools that generations of people after him, including abolitionists, used to fight for the very freedoms he wrote about.
And that really leaves us with a big question, one that goes way beyond just John Locke. How do we judge historical figures? Do we weigh their groundbreaking ideas more heavily than their personal actions and inconsistencies, or is it the other way around? There's no easy answer, but it's definitely something worth thinking about.